Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Government grants can be a great way to establish or grow a small business. After all, they amount to free capital. But how do you go about applying, or for that matter, even finding the grants that could be open to you? Ruchi Gupta is one of Australia's experts in applying for government grants. She founded the Launchpad Co, which helps steer businesses through the often intimidating process. Ruchi spoke at the 2022 Australian Business Forum, Small Biz Week in Melbourne, where she caught up with Jeff Waters and began with her advice to companies considering applying for a grant.
There's a lot of small businesses out there, and the whole idea of grants and tenders can be quite intimidating, especially as an owner who wears a lot of different hats, which is why we're in operation to take that headache away from you. Look, in terms of grants, knowing where to look is the first place. Not every business can warrant a grant. Grants are generally driven by government priority sectors. If you're looking at government funding, there are also not-for-profit that put the investments out there. There is private sector that puts the investments out there. But you really have to be in the right cohort as a business. So when I say the right cohort, from a government point of view, the priority sectors are things like innovation, technology, health, agriculture. From private sector, you're looking at industry associations that put a lot of investment into art organizations, into sporting clubs, into not-for-profits and community welfare projects. So, for example, housing is a very big issue. So there's generally a lot of grant funding in that space. So the very first thing I would suggest to a business that is considering grant funding is getting in touch with a specialist who can guide you in terms of what grants there are out there. Just to scare you slightly, there are about 3,000 to 4,000 grants at any point in time. A lot of small businesses, unfortunately, don't know that because, the information's all over the place. It's not as readily available as one would think. So getting in touch with someone who can guide you in terms of, understanding your business and then guiding you in terms of where you need to go looking for funding is the first step.
How difficult is it to apply for a grant like that?
It is quite competitive. For every grant that opens up, you would be looking at 2,000 to 5,000 applications. So it's insanely competitive. What generally happens is there's a pool of funding available. So there may be 10 businesses, there may be 20, there may be 50 businesses that would get funding as long as they fit in within that pool, obviously, of grant funding that's available. So very, very competitive.
Can you tell me, in a general sense, what sort of small businesses wouldn't qualify for grants?
Look, there's generally not a lot of grant funding for startups. And the reason for that, or my understanding of that, is because the risk is too high. And why a lot of these businesses get moved or pushed towards a bank loan is because banks do their due diligence, right? And you know that a lot of the applications that get put in for a bank loan get rejected because either they don't have the potential or the risk appetite is too high, right? So startups generally tend to lose out. However, having said that, if you're in the right priority sector, there may be funding there. So like health, for example, there's a lot of grants that come out for health research. There's a lot of grants that come out for new technology development, innovation, things like that. So the fact is grants come and go throughout the whole year. So if you're not eligible for something right now, doesn't mean that you would not be eligible for something later. It's a matter of just keeping an eye out, being in the right area as a business and working with someone who can guide you. Like I said in there as well, having a farm, for example, does not automatically qualify you for a grant because agriculture is it's a priority sector for the government. What happens is you need to really know what you're wanting to invest the money in, what those projects are, and then there may be ways around or other grants that we can have a look at that you may not have actually considered at face value.
What about tenders?
Government tenders and even private sector tenders are very competitive. Look, it's not funding as such. It is a slightly different take. You need to have, obviously, an application and prove why someone should consider you as a collaboration partner. It is insanely competitive as well. Look, the difference with grants and with tenders is having that compelling business pitch. and having that business case as to, with tenders get put out for a reason, right? So how can you satisfy that need of the company that's putting the tender out to the best of your abilities? Now, that normally, entails your resource base, your capability, your capacity, your skill set, your experience, things like that, your processes internally, your systems. How will you satisfy that requirement from the tender-making organization?
Okay, back to grants. You said that there were a lot of them, but if I'm a small business owner who thinks, oh my goodness, I'd like to look at this, where do I know you said to go and, talk to an expert, but that might be the second step. The first step might be just generally investigating. What sort of place would I look?
So the very first place I would say is business.gov.au is a fantastic resource. It has a lot of information about government grants in Victoria. So that would be the very first place you look for. In terms of private sector investments and grants.
Sorry, it's not just Victoria though. Does it cover the whole country?
Yes, it does cover the whole country. If you jump on to the local website as well, so New South Wales, for example, Service New South Wales has a whole list of grants that you can apply through the state government. Same with Queensland. If you put in Queensland grants, the first thing that pops up on Google, amazing resource in terms of small business, how you set it up, what sort of grants are there. They also run grant writing workshops every now and then. So it's a really good place to start for government grants. And there's a lot of information. Private sector gets a little tricky, because that can be anywhere. So, you might need to jump onto the ANZ website or the CBA website and have a look at that. Budget Direct, for example, does a few. Ian Potter Foundation does a few. So it's really knowing where your business is at and who invests in those sorts of businesses.
Just finally, how would you describe the whole, for want of a better term, grants industry at the moment? How is it going given the economic circumstances?
Look, I think grants have been around for a fairly long time. I think they've really come to surface more so in the last couple of years due to COVID. There were quite a lot of grants that were put out by the government, obviously. Things have really shaken up with small businesses and the funding that has or has not been there previously. I think grants are getting a lot of airtime now. And fair enough, because, for some small businesses that have a lot of potential, sometimes the whole idea of going to a venture capitalist or going to a bank and applying for a loan can be quite intimidating. If you're in the right sector, there may be funding for you, but I think it's really taking up shape.
That was Ruchi Gupta, founder and CEO of the Launchpad Co. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.